Paul Grayman spent nearly a week familiarizing himself with the daily work and life of a lord. During this time, his original memories gradually returned. The territory he was in belonged to the Aldor Kingdom, the westernmost country on the known continent. To the east of the kingdom lay numerous human nations, with the Gabella Empire being the most powerful among them. The north and east of the kingdom were dominated by vast mountain ranges, inhabited by many dwarven clans. Beyond the Rocky Mountains to the north lay endless grasslands dotted with numerous orc tribes, and further north was the rarely traveled endless ice plains. To the south of the known world were discontinuous expanses of rainforests, inhabited by elves known for their beauty and elegance. What worried him a bit was the existence of a vast religious organization in this world, the Church. It had different formal titles in different historical periods, but people eventually referred to it simply as the Church. Its faith spread almost throughout the human nations, with even believers among the non-human races. The priest he encountered on the night he woke up was a clergyman of this religion. With his current memory, he didn't know much about the historical background of this religion, nor whether it had any dark history. But it was certain that there were plenty of fanatical believers among humans, and he had encountered several with his limited experience. The territory directly controlled by the Church was not vast, only slightly larger than a duchy, but its influence could be said to be immense. Isn't this setting already overused? It seems to appear in every world-crossing story. He was too tired to complain. Moreover, it seemed that magic existed in this world, although most people, including nobles, had never seen a magic user in their lifetime. Many regarded magic as nonsense. However, his steward, Philip, solemnly swore that he had been saved by a mage from bandits when he was a child. According to Philip, the mage gestured with his left hand, chanted some words, and then a large fireball shot out from the wand in his right hand, instantly scorching the faces of the bandits opposite him. Well, since there were already dwarves, elves, and orcs in this fantasy world, the existence of magic wasn't entirely implausible. But he tended to think that what the steward saw was more like stage magic tricks. On the first weekend after his awakening, the long-awaited parade finally began. As per his request, the soldiers formed 3 formations and marched through the small square under the command of the knights. "These are my soldiers?" The young count's face turned pale. The soldiers in the formations wore all sorts of clothing, with the only common item being a cloth armor embroidered with the Grayman family crest. At first, the formations seemed somewhat orderly, but as they began to march, the steps quickly became chaotic. By the time they reached him, the formation had become disorganized and sparse, barely recognizable. "Gentlemen, it's necessary to raise the standards for the quality of our army," Paul said grimly after summoning the knights. The knights looked at each other, and finally Bryce stepped forward. "My lord, the thing is, our place is quite remote, with no other lords coveting it. Combined with the simple folk here, we usually have lax military preparations. Frankly, we didn't expect pirates to strike so far from the coast this time. A bloody lesson indeed, comrades. Gentlemen." The young lord sighed deeply, looking genuinely distressed. The failure last time was indeed a bloody lesson. The knights were overwhelmed with shame. The death of the old count cast a shadow over their hearts. Paul took advantage of the situation and declared, "Therefore, I have decided that I will personally supervise the training of the new recruits recruited this time." "Yes, my lord." Although they harbored great doubts about the young count's military knowledge, the embarrassing performance of the parade team left the knights too timid to voice objections. Another week passed like this, and a new round of recruitment gathered a total of 315 new recruits. Paul decided to reorganize the army based on the military structure from his previous life on Earth, and thus announced his reorganization plan to the knights. The army was organized into 5 levels: battalion, company, platoon, squad, and fire team.
The most basic unit, the fire team, consisted of 10 people under normal circumstances, with positions for both a squad leader and a deputy, adhering to a 3-tiered structure. Each company consisted of 3 platoons, with a company headquarters and a company commander and deputy. Each battalion comprised 3 companies, with a battalion headquarters and a battalion commander and deputy. A regiment consisted of 3 battalions, with a regimental headquarters and a regimental commander and deputy. Corresponding to this structure, he also devised a military rank system modeled after the previous world system. Under the current structure, there were 2 ranks for soldiers, private and corporal, 3 for non-commissioned officers, sergeant, staff sergeant, and sergeant, 3 for officers, second lieutenant, first lieutenant, and captain, and 3 for field officers, major, lieutenant colonel, and colonel. He also stipulated the corresponding relationships between ranks.
He also established protocols for special circumstances, such as when commanders were incapacitated or sacrificed and unable to command their troops. The sequence of command transfer prioritized based on position, then rank, and finally seniority. Taking a company as an example, if the company commander became incapacitated and unable to command in battle, the deputy company commander would take over. If the deputy commander also encountered an accident, the squad leaders would sequentially assume command of the entire company based on their ranks. If the ranks of the squad leaders were identical, they would be sorted by their seniority. Similar principles applied to other organizational units. The rank system ensured tighter organization within the troops, preventing the chaos seen in old armies where the unit dispersed once the commander fell. Under the rank system, in the event of such accidents, a new commander would automatically assume command in sequence, ensuring the sustainability of combat effectiveness. The knights were somewhat dizzy with these complex titles. Some suggested simplifying the ranks directly to 4 levels: soldiers, non-commissioned officers, officers, and field officers, eliminating further subdivisions within each level. Their rationale was that the current army of a few hundred in the territory didn't justify such complexity, but their proposal was rejected by the young Earl. He explained, "Although our army size is still small, we must establish a framework first. This way, if we encounter more serious emergencies in the future, expansion will be more convenient." These short-sighted fellows, Paul silently criticized. I haven't even brought out terms like division, corps, army group, general, and marshal. The reason he didn't propose larger-scale formations or higher-level ranks now was twofold. Firstly, the current troop size was too small, and secondly, he didn't dare. Even with the largest regimental structure, if fully manned, it would have over 1,000 people, quite a substantial military force for a remote earldom like his. If he were to propose division-scale formations of tens of thousands or even larger army-level formations, and this were to leak out through malicious intent, it might lead to accusations of plotting rebellion. After all, even a knight's order in the capital had only slightly more than 10,000 people. Moreover, those who had fought in battles for the country and were truly distinguished deserved the title of general. It wouldn't be right to bestow titles like brigadier general or major general upon mere local knights who usually dealt with bandits and pirates, managing only a few hundred men. There were also objections to assigning a mess section to each company, deemed unnecessary by some. This will ensure our combat readiness. When it came to the mess section, the Lord suddenly became excited, stood up, and enthusiastically explained its great significance, speaking in terms that left the knights puzzled. However, seeing how seriously the Lord valued it, no one opposed. Finally, Paul proposed to standardize the army's readiness and offered compensation allowances for soldiers for the loss of labor at home. The knights had no objections to this, as it was all paid for by the Lord's estate, but Philip, the steward standing nearby, almost fainted. Recruiting soldiers had already cost a fortune, and now the young master wanted to increase expenses, which would be ongoing. It seemed he would have to find a good time to persuade him otherwise. After the meeting dispersed, what troubled Steward Philip even more was that the young master had tasked him with custom-making 2 sets of clothes for each of the new recruits, to be completed within a month. Despite his strong opposition to what he considered squandering money, the young master repeatedly emphasized the importance of a uniform appearance for a regular army. Philip had no choice but to comply.
The day after the meeting with the knights, Paul organized the troops according to his new structure. With both new and old soldiers totaling over 600, they were divided into 2 understrength infantry battalions. After organizing the soldiers, he remembered a group of estate guards. Being somewhat compulsive, he decided to establish an organization for them as well, forming a separate unit, the Internal Guard. Following the military police system from his previous life, the basic units remained squads and platoons, with higher levels structured as companies, battalions, and regiments, corresponding to squads, companies, and battalions respectively. To simplify matters, he implemented a rank system similar to that of the regular army. The estate guards numbered only 60, organized into 2 platoons. As for the knights and their attendants, this posed a dilemma. After all, knights were already at the threshold of nobility, and from his observations, the gap between nobles and commoners in this world was quite significant. Mixing them into one system could potentially cause dissatisfaction among them. Yet, he hadn't firmly secured his position as lord under his seat, and keeping such a sizable force independent felt peculiar. He sought Bryce's counsel first, expressing his thoughts and concerns. Unexpectedly, Bryce blushed and reassured him. Back when the Grayman family was exiled to the northwest coast by the king, it carried strong punitive implications. Previous vassals either faced collective punishment or switched allegiances. Now, the knights on the estate, how should I put it? Bryce hesitated. Forgive me if this sounds offensive, my lord, but your family was denied formal enfeoffment by the royal family at the time. Although our ancestors were granted knightly fiefs, our knightly status isn't recognized by the kingdom's officials or other nobles. People generally refer to us as wild knights. Apart from knowing letters and martial skills, we're not much different from common folk. Most of us still work the fields ourselves.
Paul queried curiously. What about Baron Ford? He inherited his title from distant relatives abroad. Before inheriting the title, he had served your family for a long time, and he's a nominal noble, meaning he has the title but not the estate. I see. Then it's up to you to integrate them into the army. You seem to have quite a reputation among them. Bryce chuckled nervously. Oh, not at all. I can only drink them all under the table at best. Rest assured, my lord, I won't let you down. As Bryce had predicted, the knights and their attendants harbored no resistance. Most were appointed as officers in various units. Bryce and another knight named Claude were appointed as commanders of the 1st Infantry Battalion and 2nd Infantry Battalion, respectively. Next, a series of physical fitness tests followed to select sergeants for each squad. Initially, planning to prioritize literacy as the major criteria, Paul discovered that nearly all several hundred recruits were illiterate, with only a few able to recognize and spell their own names. Helpless, he focused on physical fitness instead. Due to the generally low literacy level of the troops, the appointed junior officers all had the term acting prefixed to their titles, and their ranks were temporary. Currently, all soldiers were corporals, and the acting squad leaders were temporary sergeants. All right, considering the recent tense military situation, we mustn't delay any longer. Training begins immediately, the young count declared enthusiastically. Ignoring objections from the others, he insisted on conducting training in the woods outside town and announced they would camp there throughout the training period. He took only the 2nd Infantry Battalion and the 1st Internal Guard Platoon with him, leaving the 1st Battalion in the heart of Alden town to handle emergencies.
Once the location was selected, the new recruits began setting up camp under the guidance of the veterans. Paul summoned Knight Claude, now Major Claude, to discuss the training plan. Handing Claude a parchment filled with elaborate details, he proudly said, "Take a look at this, Claude. Have you ever seen a more brilliant training plan?" Claude quickly skimmed through it, sweating profusely. "My lord, this kind of training could be fatal." "What? How is that possible? This is already a streamlined version with many subjects cut out."
My lord, the intensity of this training is almost on par with what I endured as a knight's attendant. If you can endure it, why can't they? Nourishment is crucial, my lord. Though I wasn't well off back then, I could still manage meat once a week. These soldiers, coming from common backgrounds, won't have such conditions. According to previous provisions, we can only ensure they don't go hungry, but once physical activity increases, it'll be hard for them without meat. Paul slapped his forehead. I didn't consider that. All right, I'll write a letter immediately for Philip, instructing him to enhance our food supply, especially increasing meat provisions. Additionally, we'll organize hunting parties ourselves every day. Claude chuckled. I have no objections, but Steward Philip is probably going to have a fit. My lord, besides physical training, there's also talk of standing at attention, marching in step, and other baffling terms that even I can't quite grasp from just the literal meaning. Could you explain further? Discipline, Claude. Have you seen the embarrassing display during the parade? Our army must be disciplined, orderly in advance and retreat, always acting as a cohesive whole. This is what gives us strength, not a ragtag group of irregulars. Claude wiped his brow, sweating. The kingdom's regular army doesn't demand this level. Very well, what you say makes sense. It's late now. Let's skip the other subjects for today. Before dinner, let's start with standing at attention to whet their appetites. Watching the busy soldiers, the young count rubbed his hands eagerly, emitting a sinister chuckle that sent shivers down Claude's spine.
Markelov stood stiffly behind a cross, enduring agonizingly. What use does this training have for fighting pirates? What exactly is going on? He had complained countless times in his mind. He wanted to glance at the person next to him, but the thought was suppressed immediately. Several unlucky fellows had been severely punished by Major Claude for fidgeting during attention drill, and were now forbidden from eating. Markelov certainly did not want to go hungry. The new lord is truly eccentric, Markelov continued to grumble inwardly. He's fixated on all sorts of weird things, standing at attention, marching in step. Even the knightly officers are forced to train like this. Best not to mention it. Just thinking about marching in step made Markelov feel overwhelmingly embarrassed. That strange posture still made his face flush. Thankfully, they weren't training in town, or the villagers would have had a good laugh. The young lord probably suffered from severe OCD. His demands for neatness and uniformity had reached bizarre levels. Requiring blankets to be folded into perfect squares was just too much. If it weren't for the young lord personally demonstrating how to fold them and painstakingly guiding the soldiers through the correct method, Markelov would have suspected the lord of intentionally amusing himself at their expense. The only normal aspect was the assassination training conducted every morning or afternoon, personally instructed by Major Claude. From Markelov's perspective, this was the only training directly beneficial for staying alive in combat. He listened earnestly to the Major's explanations and practiced diligently. Of course, despite his various complaints, Markelov deeply respected and even felt grateful for the young lord. Not only had he eaten meat twice this week, which was rare enough, but there was an even more significant reason. The lord had actually taught them how to read. Literacy was something most commoners never had the opportunity or financial means to systematically learn. Certainly, there were quite a few literate commoners, such as merchants, minstrels, and servants of nobles, who could read many words. However, compared to the vast population of commoners, they were extremely rare. In some remote areas, literacy was regarded almost like magic in people's minds, something only nobles and servants of the gods could attain. Many commoners' literacy levels were limited to recognizing their own names, and most couldn't even achieve that. Not only in human kingdoms, but it was said that many orcish tribes on the Great Plains used knotted ropes to record events. Markelov could still vividly recall the incredulous expressions on everyone's faces when the young lord announced the literacy class to be held at night to teach everyone how to read. and Major Claude's mouth gaping wide enough to fit a goose egg from sheer surprise. However, many soldiers actually believed that as mere soldiers living off rations, they didn't need to learn to read. What a bunch of resigned fools, Markelov secretly sneered. He was different. He didn't want to spend his life in a haze of ignorance.
Suddenly, a whistle sounded, followed by the loud command of Major Claude. "Everyone assemble!" Markelov immediately dropped all thoughts and moved toward the standard bearer in front of Major Claude, standing shoulder to shoulder in line with the rest of his rank. After a week of training, this had become almost a reflex action. "Stand at ease," Major Claude continued to command. Next, the young lord walked over and began to speak. "Soldiers, over this past week, your progress has been remarkable, which fills me with great satisfaction. Your military posture now meets the standards I require. Therefore, I announce that from now on, you don't need to wear the cross when standing at attention." Pausing for a moment and seeing no cheers erupting, he nodded satisfactorily. However, there are still shortcomings as reported by Captain Claude. Many of you still lack the essential skills for assassination, making it impossible to combat the most vicious criminals. In the future, you must continue to practice diligently. Sweat more in peacetime, bleed less in wartime. "It's all because, my lord, you've wasted half of our training time on standing at attention and marching in step," many quietly grumbled to themselves. "And your personal hygiene. I've emphasized this every time I speak. This is the last warning. If I find any rubbish or disorder in any tent again, I swear I'll have the whole squad running around the camp until they drop dead." Now, I have good news to announce. Previously, I had Butler Philip customize uniform attire for us. Today, they've arrived, and you will receive them immediately to change into.
Following the arrangements of various officers, everyone stepped forward to receive their uniforms. The uniforms were based on those of the 8th Route Army from a previous life, but in dark green. In addition to jackets and trousers, there were hats, leather belts, shoes, leg wrappings, and leggings. Also included were shoulder patches with insignia from their previous military ranks, which could be fastened with buttons onto their shoulders. After each soldier received 2 sets of uniforms, they promptly changed clothes. Since everyone present was used to such changes, there were no reservations. These uniforms had been hastily made, tailored in larger sizes to ensure the entire army could be outfitted. As a result, many found them somewhat baggy compared to their patched and ragged previous attire. Nevertheless, just replacing their old, worn-out clothes immediately lifted their morale. After changing clothes and reforming the ranks, although no one spoke due to discipline, the soldiers' excitement was palpable. Apparently, the new uniforms had significantly boosted morale. Claude watched the reformed formation with profound emotion. Just a week ago, these people had been a group of undisciplined peasants, with some unable to distinguish left from right. Now, they stood with order and discipline, commanding respect. If this had been before, disregarding other aspects, just assembling so quickly would have been unimaginable. Now, this unit already had a faint aura of a regular army just from their appearance.
No, even the kingdom's regular army couldn't match this level of uniformity. With the new uniforms, in terms of neatness and uniformity alone, only the royal guard that he had never seen before could compare. He was beginning to understand why the Count had invested so much time in what he had previously considered meaningless training. Claude thought to himself, the only downside now is that nearly half of them haven't seen blood yet. Paul instructed Claude to continue training according to today's schedule, then led the servants delivering the uniforms into a tent guarded by inner guards. "My lord, everything you requested is here. This is the first batch, but La Philip is still gathering the rest, which will take some time." "Excellent. These will suffice for current needs. However, we must expedite the rest." Boxes were laid out on the ground, and the tent smelled of sulfur. Satisfied, he observed everything, then asked, "Where are the people I requested?" The servant replied respectfully, "They are waiting in the adjacent tent, my lord." "How are they? Are they reliable?"
Please rest assured, my lord, they are loyal and devoted individuals who have served your family for generations, like myself. But LePhilip personally vetted each one. Very well, Ron. From now on, you'll be in charge of supplying here. I won't mistreat you. But remember, no one is to be informed of what happens here. Understood? I mean no one. Understood? I understand, my lord. I swear by the Lord of Light that I will keep silent. Even if it means damnation, not a word will escape my lips. Ron immediately swore, pointing to the sky. Good. You may go now. Remember what I said.